Hello, AfterBuzzers, and welcome to the After Show for Genius, Chapter 8. In today's episode, Raymond Geist becomes a human being and is freaking amazing. Who would have thought? Einstein makes questionable decisions again, and Hoover has a bug up his butt. Stay tuned.
You're tuning into the destination for TV superfan discussion, AfterBuzz TV. And now, let the buzz begin.
Hello and welcome. Guys, you can't see it yet. You don't know yet. But there's a special guest in the studio, and I'm super excited to talk to him about all things genius. It has been a super fun, crazy week. Yes. Before we get into our favorite moments from this week, why don't we go around the table and have everyone introduce themselves?
Hi all, I'm Louiza Sharamatyan, and you can find me on Instagram at Nobody Reads Anymore, and on Twitter at Nobody Reads.
Hey everybody, great to be back here. My name is Elysabeth Alfano, and you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at DinnerPartyCHGO.
And last but not least, my name is Zach Silverman. You can find me all across social media at Zach with a CH Silverman too, and at my website, thezachsilverman.com.
Absolutely. I'm Joelle Monique. You can find me all over the internet at Joelle Monique, every week at blackgirlnerds.com, and every Wednesday at Schmoes Know. Elizabeth, do you want to do the honors and introduce our guest?
Sure thing, people. Let's get into it. So we have a great guest here on the couch in the AfterBuzz TV studios. So Sam Sokolow, thank you for being here.
It's an absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me.
You are one of the three, along with Jeff and Chris Cooney of EUE Sokolow Productions, and really, let's cut to the chase, executive producer, one of the many executive producers on Genius with Nat Geo. So we're going to be with you all hour talking about some behind-the-scenes stuff, and I want to know about some Nat Geo negotiations. So we'll work it all in. But great to have you here. Thanks for joining us.
You got it. Again, thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Why don't we just we'll dive into you first, because I have a lot of questions. First, talk about how this project comes to you. How do you get involved with Genius?
So my partners, Chris and Jeff Cooney, who you mentioned, and Gigi Pritzker, who founded Odd Lot Entertainment, they owned the book together, and we're trying to develop it as a feature film, and I'm purely in the television business. And at a certain moment in time, about 2 or 3 years ago, after I kind of poked them quite a bit and said, I really think that this is a 10-hour story, and I believe that in my heart, that Einstein's life was so traumatic, set against so many historical moments, and was so interesting. And personally, his younger life to me was so interesting because I don't know much about being a genius, but I know a lot about getting kicked out of school and being a disappointment to your parents and too many girls and too many things that you're trying to figure out. And so I kind of understood that young man, I thought, a little bit. And I went and had a meeting at Odd Lot and said, what do you think about doing this as a television property? And they responded wonderfully. And Rachel Shane, who I think was on the show recently, and I really set off to try to crack the code on how to do this for television. And 10 hours just seemed perfect to us. Yeah. And then we had to go on the process of development. So I was honored and thrilled to have the opportunity to, be a part of bringing this to life. I actually grew up with Walter Isaacson. He's been a family friend my whole life. So the chance to work with Walter in any way was just super cool to me. But once we got into the story we wanted to tell, it was about finding, a writer, and television's a team sport. And we were blessed to find Noah Pink, who we found through a woman named Melissa Rucker, who works at Odd Lot with Rachel and Gigi. And Noah just blew our minds in our very first conversation. And we can talk more if you want to about it, but once we engaged Noah to write that first script in the 10-hour Bible, or an overview of the series, it became a train going down the tracks, and picked up wonderful passengers along the way.
Wow. Two things I want to dissect in there. First, you said that you had to break down the code, which is hilarious because I instantly pictured Einstein doing his breakdowns in the middle of the street. I'm curious as to what was the main factor, what broke it for you? And then I also would like to know, in getting to know Noah and what he was doing with the scripts, what sold you on him? What was the moment where you were like, we must have him?
I think, like a lot of things in life, not everything, God knows, but a lot of things in life, sometimes it's like love at first sight. And in this case, it was love at first phone call. Noah's based in Toronto, but we had a call. Rachel and I had the initial call with Noah, and he was so informed and seemed to have such an incredible grasp of the history and the science and the man. And that was a lot of what we aspired to do here. And it's very rare that you have a dream this big, and then it happens bigger and better than you dreamt. And Noah, I think, was the first creative element that saw that as well, the same way we did. And Noah, in that conversation, among the things that he put forth was this meeting with Geist. And he said, it was 1 or 2 chapters in the book, but he posited on that first call that was a place where Einstein kind of found his humanity.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden went from the brash, young, a kid who, as we say, is the first rock star, and really kind of one of the things that we talked about early on was how Mark Zuckerberg, or guys like him, all respect, but had Einstein to teach him how to be kind of an aloof genius ass or whatever, And Einstein was like, no, I'm this. This is who I am. And I think Noah felt that. And there was just a connection that was so deep. And this Geist meeting became this critical centerpiece of his draft and how we wanted to tell the story. And, all that. There were several points of this process along the way where the first conversation turned out to be what happened.
Oh, wow.
And that
was
was
a home run in all instances.
Yeah, but that's how we
amazing.
connected with Noah right out of the gate.
Well, so I'm curious about, sorry to get you there, I'm curious about the connection to Nat Geo. Did you have Nat Geo in mind, or did you shop it around to many places and they picked it up? And sort of the second part to that question is, was it 10 episodes only? Do you have that in mind, or did you ever consider 13?
No, I mean, we envisioned it right out of the gate as 10 hours. I think, television has become this wonderful place to create and to adapt books or people or stories without the same formatic rules that feature films have, or that television had even 5 years ago, or Big Little Lies, 7 hours, The Night Of, 6 hours. Right. So I think it's about getting it right, and 10 felt right. And I give Rachel a lot of credit right away. She's like, I feel 10 hours. And so we followed that instinct, and it ended up, I think, being the perfect amount of time to tell this story. In terms of Nat Geo, when Ron and Brian and Imagine, Anna Culp and Francie Calfo and that team came on board, the question became, where do we go? And without getting too wonkish with the business part of it, Nat Geo had just announced to be in this business. And they had an investment that was made by News Corp, so they were armed and ready. And I think, for my part, the brand of Ron Howard and what Imagine is, and the brand of Albert Einstein and the brand of Nat Geo, they made perfect sense for each other.
Yeah, it really does.
And it doesn't mean that this couldn't have lived on other networks, but certain networks have certain personalities.
Yes.
And I think, as Ron said, even in the first meeting, I'm telling you, it was amazing, what Nat Geo stands for. Curiosity and exploration,
innovation,
and factuality and beautiful cinematic photography. It was just a perfect home, and the timing was right. And it's so rare. I've been producing television for 20 years, and it is very rare to be the first show of a type on a network. There's certain excitement about that and support that comes with that, and it really is an opportunity, not just, I think, for the people involved with making the show, but for the show itself to kind of stand out. And so I think all those factors went into it, but ultimately Nat Geo wanted this, and Courtney Monroe and Carolyn Bernstein, who from Nat Geo, were so passionate and adamant that we work with them right out of the gate, that it really came together pretty beautifully.
And speaking of Walter Isaacson, so he's your childhood friend. That's amazing. I've been reading his book, his Life and Universe, and like I said last time, he does such a great job of taking the celebrity out of Einstein. We connect with him as a human being. So you said you had a funny story, so I want to know an interesting story.
It's a sweet story. I grew up in New York, and my parents were early inhabitants of, not like Easton and Southampton, the big swanky old school places, but Bridgehampton in the middle. They started going out there in the 60s, and by the 70s had a great social community of friends that became this softball game in Sag Harbor that is part of like the artist-writers game that you may or may not have heard of, but it's this amazing group of people that for me to be around as a kid, just thinking of them as uncles and aunts and people that I'm playing softball with, you don't know any better. But as I went through time, once at 10 years old, I was pitching in one of the games, and there was a catcher named Carl, and he was a great guy, and we kind of hit it off, and we got back to the dugout after an inning, and I was like, so what do you do for a living? And everybody cracked up because it was Carl Bernstein, only 5 years away from breaking Watergate, and so all of a sudden I'm like, this is a crazy crowd. At 13 I moved to shortstop, and the second baseman was Walter. And so we turned to, and he was just a loving guy and amazingly supportive and a wonderful man. I mean, a great friend, and has shown up at all different times, in my career and life. So when this became an opportunity, the chance to work with Walter was so special that, it wasn't why we did it, but it turned out to be, to me, one of the sweetest parts of it.
Well, I doubt that you have this, but if you can find a picture of Walter Isaacson playing second base, we'll put it on our social media.
Don't be sure we don't have that. I'll say,
We'll take it.
Yeah, no leaking. You got to be careful here.
All right, let's dive into the episode a little bit. Okay. First of all, as we were talking about the Geist meeting, I really liked this device. At first, we kind of talked about how at the end of episode 1, we weren't sure where this is going. We were like, where's Jeffrey Rush? There's a lot of confusion. And in this episode, we get to see, first of all, Vincent's incredible range in acting.
Yeah.
My
the
goodness.
spectrum that he showed today was just amazing.
Fantastic. Almost teary-eyed there, and then talking about his mother, and then
even the more subtle moments of just, do I like this guy?
Yeah.
I will always
you don't know
love
how you
him.
feel.
Because I think of him as Pete Campbell every time I see him.
Yeah.
I saw Pete Campbell come out once or twice in there for
I did
sure.
I did
yes.
too.
I
from
seen it
Mad
come
Men,
out. I saw it come out when Einstein was kind of making fun of him. Because Pete Campbell was always the butt of the joke, and Mad Men and everything, and
Yeah,
and it's those moments right after we start to see him warm up to Einstein, where he starts questioning, what his mission really is here, and we get to even see like some sincerity. He's like, I'm just here to ask questions, and if we answer them, we're probably going to be okay, but I have to do my job.
And then when he realizes he's been perhaps duped, that he really thought he was coming in good faith to answer questions, and then he realizes perhaps that wasn't the case. And then there's also that scene or that bit of dialogue about his mother, and I think that's where he turns and thinks, I really should be doing service. Am I still doing service?
Yeah, definitely.
well, he's so blind to what's been going on because Einstein asked him, he's like, how long have you been here for? 2 years. And like he doesn't know what's going on in America. He is kind of, I guess, in his own little bubble within the embassy and doesn't really know what's going on with the Jews outside, with the Nazism coming about, the fascism.
2 years is a good chunk of time, and if you're a diplomat, you got to know. Well, he was sort of woken up by Einstein.
But he like everyone else in the episode, keeps saying like, well,
they're worried
he's
about
just
something
he's
different.
like a weird, crazy guy out there, and like, why are you even bothered by him? Like, he's just shouting crazy things.
This is what's awesome about the show is like we as a culture know what had happened with Hitler. We know what happened with Germany and everything, but the people of the time had no idea. He was just some madman. I mean, a perfect segue, I guess, is, and I might get some flack for this, Trump. Can you honestly believe he would be a president like a year ago?
There's a lot of people who said, even the night of, like, why bother to vote? Why bother to watch the election roll in? Like, people were in disbelief. They didn't think it could happen.
They never believed that Hitler would come to power, would kill his own people. I mean, he said in there. He's like, but you're a German. You're like, they're not gonna. You're the most famous German scientist. Right. They're not gonna kick you out or anything. And he's worried about getting killed.
Yes. Right.
Well, and about his wife and
his family even.
Community.
Yeah.
I guess that's a really good place just to segue into his coming to America. We see Einstein comes in, and I love the disembarking off of the ship.
Me too. I was
like
going to say
celebrity.
The slow-mo as they...
Which one are you talking about? The
first time.
No, I know the first time. Are you talking about when everyone's like, Einstein? No, I love when they got you guys. I don't know who did it personally. Got a shot of the feet, and it was like a slow motion shot of the foot, and there's a moment where he took a breath and was just like, I'm on a new land, like this is because he's never been to America.
Right. No, it was a beautiful moment. Ken Biller, the showrunner, who I have so much respect for and admiration for what he managed to achieve here, directed episode 8, and it was a great choice. Obviously, Matthias Herndl, who's the cinematographer, and I mean everybody involved in this was so at their A game, and they're such talented people. But that was something that resonated with me too. You're now in America, and that's supposed to stand for something.
Yes.
And I think that that's something I'm very proud of this episode. I'm happy to be here to talk about it. Those themes permeate this episode.
Yeah.
America is this
the
dream.
Land of the free, he mentions
he speaks very specifically to it, that immigration is the business model. Bringing the best and the brightest to our shores is that Walter actually said at one point on one of the panels that we had, that when it's a known fact that when immigration is happening, our standards go up, our professional standards go up, our science standards go up, our math standards go up. We're a more productive society in any country, not just America. And when immigration is stamped out, those things go down. And it is not, multiculturalism is the bedrock of this country. And I think that, some of those themes in this episode obviously resonate today with what's happening, but I think that's also a lesson that this has been happening a long time.
Yeah.
That a lot of this stuff it's always the fight. It's always the fight for a better nation, a better community, a better people, and aspiring to something and a place that we can go where, and when I say we, I speak as an American, I speak as a Jewish man, a place that we can be together and be free. And explore who we are as people and as a society. And Einstein was dealing with so much of that pressure in that moment as the most famous scientist,
most famous
our most famous Jewish man, one of the most famous human beings on earth in Germany at that moment. And everybody's saying it could never happen here. And, I don't think it could happen here, but they didn't think it could happen there. And part of, I think, you asked earlier before we started, you said, why should millennials, what does this do for millennials? And I think that, if you don't know the history, it's hard to have a better future.
Yeah.
And I think that the lessons that we may be learning today or experiencing today, they've repeated themselves over time to multiple different communities over thousands of years. These situations have repeated themselves, and open shores and an open society is still an aspiration, not a perfection, but something I think to always aspire to.
And you mentioned history. I didn't really realize that we opened this show and they're rounding up Jews to deport them. And Hoover is saying that, I'm ready to take them all offshores, and the subversives, I think they call them, and I didn't know that about
anarchists.
Anarchists. I had no idea that happened to
socialists
people.
And anarchists,
and because they weren't assimilating to be the Christian what America was back then, I guess. And
I mean, it's hard to even say they're speaking English and they're working in the country. It wasn't even so much about how are you fitting in, but just that you could pose a threat, and before we find out whether you do or not, we just need to get rid of you.
You out.
And we see how scared Elsa really was, trying to protect them when they were asking him questions about Zionism and all these things. And Elsa's like, no, we're here to have a speech at Princeton, at Harvard.
She's smart.
And,
she really is
smart.
his publicist.
She was his PR manager,
she was
right?
his business manager, his publicist.
Never was that more clear when she started pointing out to which journalist should speak. I was like, that's just a straight publicist now.
Get yourself an Elsa. An Elsa.
And he even says, Einstein, and I'm sort of jumping ahead here, she talks about dalliances, and Einstein even says, I'm so sorry because you made me. I was a lump of clay.
Lump of clay, you shaped me.
I wouldn't still be alive if you hadn't taken me
That's
in.
such a beautiful quote, because before that she said, when she was upset at him for being late for the opera, she said, your contributions to the world absorb you from the responsibility you bear to those you claim you love. They do not. I am not an afterthought. I am still your number one commitment. And I love
her.
that.
How awesome was Emily? They do not.
Oh my gosh.
They
do not.
I'm like,
so blunt, just to the point.
Wait, what about that scene with
at the top
Guy?
where she she almost growls at him? It's kind of
When
the most
Guy
perfect thing ever.
When Guy said leave, and she's
him.
like, I'm not
before
leaving.
Geist, when Einstein starts getting on a roll and he's leaning into Geist and he's stood up and he's very upset, and she's like, if you don't sit down, I will take you out. I was like, yes, this is the Elsa I've been waiting, because Elsa that's been presented to me, I feel, is just the most patient woman I have ever met.
Oh my God, so
patience of a
calculated
saint. She's like, what
woman,
can I
very
do for
calculated.
you?
well, if you think about in an earlier episode, she speaks to him I'm not going to quote it exactly, but at that moment in time, there are not many opportunities for a divorced woman to find her place in the world.
She says that in the previous episode.
And she also, same part of her character that went, and helped him raise the money that he needed for the, kind of Crimea trip that didn't ultimately work out, but got the money. She, I think, understood how to exist inside of a structure.
Right.
And Einstein was a man whose life was about existing outside of structure and saying no to structure.
Yeah.
And I think that, she was the woman that he ultimately needed, I think, at that moment in his life, certainly, and then to become the man that he ultimately became, which is the version of him that most of us think about.
Yep.
I think Mileva was the woman that he needed at that moment in time for multiple reasons. And that allowed him to free himself of familial expectations and explore his science in a way to him that was pure. Obviously,
and
it wasn't.
she helped him with the science.
Of course.
Very much so.
Very much so.
Very much
Poor
so.
Mileva.
And Gigi and Rachel mentioned too that at that time he wasn't ready for an Elsa kind of woman. So now he evolved to the wife that he needed, and he even apologized in this last episode and said,
it was so heartfelt. I believed him. 100%.
I would have been dead probably if you weren't around.
Yeah.
I believe him, but what's even stronger to me and shocking to me, although I understand it because of her position in society, she has to say, you are allowed to have these dalliances. I let you. I permit you. That was hard for me to hear.
Let's roll into it.
I think that's kind of like a
into it.
reverse psychology a little bit, because he has. I mean, we got rid of Betty, right? Betty was her name.
Didn't Betty get married?
She after that scene, she was no longer his assistant or secretary, and he even mentioned to Geist, like, "Yeah, I have a new secretary. She's not as pretty as Betty, but whatever." I think he woke up and understood, I should be respecting my wife.
But his affairs don't end after this.
No, his affairs don't end. I think she
I know they
twisted
don't,
his
but I
arm
think
and
he's getting in the
got rid of
right
Betty,
in the right mindset at least.
I just feel like Einstein's never going to be faithful. Like,
No,
I don't
no,
think
no.
He's
that.
not monogamous.
I honestly feel like there are people who are like, monogamy is I cannot be faithful. Like, I don't want that for myself, and I will just cheat on you. So we need to come to some conclusions about what we're going to do.
Think of there's so many articles out today about relationships and redefining relationships, and the New York Times Magazine had a huge piece a few weeks ago about open marriages and couples that agreed to do that. And I think to a certain degree marriages historically are arrangements. We in this country at this moment in time get to choose our own arrangements. They're not necessarily chosen for us. But I think that Einstein was a man who was trying to figure out his perfect marriage, and that doesn't mean it was conformist to what we think is right. It doesn't even mean it's right. A marriage is between two people. It's not between the opinion of other people.
Yes, it's between two people, but it's the Elsa that I worry about in that equation, because I'm not sure she's really getting her balanced out share.
Well,
I feel like Elsa gets exactly what she needs in her
happy.
relationship.
Yeah.
Like,
She is.
I don't feel like Elsa. She's never been like. Whereas Mileva, like, their relationship was first kind of based off this mutual respect of intelligence, but also lust. Like, they were kind of figuring each other out physically before they really understood each other as people. But with Elsa, it's the exact reverse. Like, they're actually family, so they've known each other really deep in intimate sense as
cousin.
people, and what you need and what I need, and how we can balance each other out. And I think she's like, look, I really care who you sleep with. Like, that doesn't bother me. I'm not invested in that part of you emotionally. But when you don't show up for the things that I've planned and organized, when again, we talked about this before, her whole life is a social thing.
Yeah.
Yes.
When
social
you
standing.
cut that part of her out, like, she's like, what I won't do is be Mileva. I will not sit here and let you dictate how I live my life. So we've got to, like, I was really proud of her.
Although a very, very clear delineation between Mileva saying and living, I do not like this life.
Yeah.
And Elsa saying in episode 8, I love this life.
I think she's.
But I've got rules too.
Right.
Yeah.
And he responded I think. And so, again, it's an imperfect science that literally, and I think that Einstein, it's a theme throughout.
Yeah.
He might be able to master the universe, but he has a hard time mastering people. And I think
being.
that was one of those things that we ultimately aspired to early on, and then in the middle of, and even now to show the man.
Yeah.
And people are not perfect. I think his equation is close to perfect, but people are not perfect, and that's a reality.
I think we're seeing that a lot in the audience reactions via social media. A lot of people are like, man, the performances and the scenery, but then when it comes to Einstein being a dad, there's like a record scratch where people are like, I don't understand what's happening. He's like the granddaddy of everything. Like, he's so sweet and funny. And we learn that he had really difficult relationships with his children. We see him.
He has no relationship with his children.
He doesn't give them any time.
How did you guys think about him visiting Edward in the asylum and how all that went down
I think it
today?
was so beautiful that he attempted to regain some kind of relationship by playing the violin, just like he did when he was younger.
He got through to him.
Yeah.
I didn't think he had any right saying, you could come live with me in America.
I thought that was incredibly rude, too, especially when you can't
in front
speak.
of Mileva, too. Like, you have no rights. You're lucky you're even seeing him right now.
That relationship, honestly, never even got better because both of his sons died pretty early on.
Yeah, in the book it says that,
like,
right?
I know you're gonna probably comment on this too. I think as a father figure, he wasn't the best, and it was already ruined.
Well, being who he was, and I mean, I think I mentioned this before, we wouldn't have gotten the things that we have today if he was a good father figure. And I think he even mentioned things in the episode where he, with Mileva, he had his science, and if it wasn't for her, he wouldn't have gotten to that level. And then with Elsa as well. But if he were to keep fitting all these things in this tiny box, he wouldn't have been able to have
fits in
equals
the
MC
affairs.
squared.
I don't know. I'm not ready to cut him some slack.
Well, I mean, look,
so
in an earlier episode, again, not to only defend his behavior, but in an earlier episode, Marie Curie talks to him about, I was never there for my children. I have a strained relationship.
But it's different than mother-father roles.
Mother-father,
a little
yeah.
different.
No doubt, but there is a price to pay for that success. This is a crazy leap, and it couldn't be a more different thing. But even Oprah Winfrey says in interviews, I don't think I would have been a great mom because I am Oprah.
I don't think that's a crazy
and so
leap at all.
so I've decided not to have kids and be in that position.
I agree with
and
that.
And
It's the sacrifice that they're willing to take to better off
Well, and
whatever
we've
else
talked
is
about
going
this
on.
before, and I'm curious about your perspective. In order to be genius, like, there's an aspect of emotional removal for that. Like, you have to be completely obsessed with your craft. Don't
The
you
brain
think?
can only. The brain can only, take in so much.
Whether
capacity.
you have to be or you just are, I think is part of the question of what genius is. Are you chasing something, or are you scratching an itch that you just can never quite get through, and that's all you think about. I think Einstein, from the time he was a little boy, wanted to crack the solution of the universe, and that was the journey he was on in life. And then the people that were on the journey with him in life were either on that journey or they weren't on that journey, for better or worse.
Yep.
I mean, I'm not going to defend him as a dad. I'm not going to defend him as a husband, although I think he had love in his heart, and I think he had things that he cared about, and certainly became more compassionate over time as he had the room to become more compassionate.
Yeah.
But I do think that there is
age. I think age helps with that.
Yeah.
Without question. There is a price to pay for genius, whether it's an intended price or an unintended price. When you have a goal, whatever that goal is, you just things have to be put to the side.
He's so focused on what he wants. Like, we even seen this episode, he almost gets run over by a car.
Right.
And in almost getting run over by a car, has a thought experiment and figures something out, because that's where he is. That's where he lives. We've said it many times along the way internally, that he was like the first rock star.
Yeah.
And when you think of a rock star, you can't wait to see them play, and they're not always great husbands, wives, parents. They're out there being rock stars.
Yeah.
And so I think that there's a lot of relatability to his experience for a lot of different parts of culture, not just science. But he was. We talked about this too. Einstein came about at the same time as Babe Ruth and at the same time as Charlie Chaplin. Global multimedia, not multimedia, but global media was just exploding.
Yeah.
And with the Industrial Revolution and science changing the way we were living, he really became like the most famous guy in the world for something that nobody else quite understood. And that's an interesting place to be and to navigate. And it's something, again, that we were thrilled to try to explore, but it's an interesting thing to think about.
It's funny how you implemented that into the episode itself, because there was he was sitting down with Chaim, was it? And I think he's like, I explained this to you 3 times already. And he's like, and I don't understand it, but at least you do, And,
well, that's what one of the great things Ken Biller, talks about a little bit. There are certain lines of dialogue in the entire series that are just real, that are taken straight from
Oh, really?
from transcripts.
See, I thought that was something to just make us as the viewers be like, all right, I'm not the only one who's really not understanding this. Like, you're having this character also, like, I'm relating to that person. Like, okay, cool, I'll still watch this.
Yeah,
show.
no, that was apparently a quote that Chaim
Really?
Weizmann actually gave to Einstein as they were traveling to America. Maybe whatever happened at that dinner or somewhere else. That was an actual quote that he had. Also in this episode was, God doesn't play dice with the universe.
Oh,
Yes.
this
That's a
was an
real
awesome episode.
quote.
For you guys. I love how you guys implemented or introduced God into this episode, because we had God talked about a few different times. Now, I'm kind of like the science guy, I guess, on this panel, and I think
Very lucky to have him.
I don't claim to know a lot, but I do like to follow some of this stuff. So when I saw him talking to Higgs, I think it was, and they had the whole the cars with the particle. Is it
Niels Bohr, I think, right?
No, it's Higgs. His Higgs boson. Higgs.
I think it was Bohr. Yeah.
Bohr. Okay, Bohr. But they're talking about the God particle, which is phenomenal. That Geist gets to mention God, and he's like, "Oh, so you are a man of faith?" And he's like, "Not in the way that you think, but."
I think he says the univerce is so extraordinary,
Yes.
only God could have created
Yes,
it.
but it's just
Yes.
it's amazing how like you bring in these factors of religion and science, and then I don't know if most of you would have known, but the particle that he's speaking about is the Higgs boson particle, which is the God particle, which is like, does it exist or not? It only exists if we could view it, and we can't view it because it's moving so fast. I don't know. I'm nerding out. Sorry.
No, it's fine.
I loved how the duality of God was placed in both of this episode.
Well, Einstein has another quote that I've learned so much doing this myself, and so much from
Beauty of
him.
it, yeah.
But he has a quote, and I'm probably going to butcher it, but that religion without science is
This quote.
yes.
lame, or and science without religion is lame.
Yeah.
Or there's
They
a
work in
better
tandem
words.
together.
Is
But they
insane. There's
exist
so much-
together. I
yes.
mean,
Yeah.
if God created everything, then God created science.
Yep.
And God gave us the ability to figure science out and do things with that.
Yeah.
So they go. I've never understood personally the anti-scientific
separation.
movement in
Yeah.
religion. I've never understood it. I understand faith, and I understand some people have certain, scripture that they believe in deeply, but the idea that in some way religion is anti-scientific or science is anti-religious it's just insane to
Because
me.
there's religion
Yeah.
and then there's organized religion, which has an agenda
Yeah.
that may or may not be religious.
He
What
said
was-
science
True.
without religion is lame. Religion without science is blind.
Right.
Yes.
There
What was
you
the
go.
quote that Einstein said to Geist
Thank you.
in this episode where he was talking about
Something about the relativity, or
I was put on this world to figure it out. I think, God created science, and then I was put on this world to figure out that science of it. To
figure out how he did it,
To
yeah.
figure out, yeah. Oh, God created the universe, and I was.
I'm just here to figure out the
figure
beauty
it
of
out.
it, yeah.
The beauty. I love that quote. It was beautiful.
And I know you mentioned Chaplin in the book. It says that Einstein and Chaplin developed this great relationship as friends. And
I wish we could have seen
Chaplin,
that, 'cause-
Chaplin
You
was
got 2
quoted
hours
saying,
left.
Chaplin
Not the
was
same,
quoted,
man. Keep tuned in for a minute over here.
Yeah. He said, Chaplin said, they are cheering us both. You because nobody understands you, and me because everybody understands me.
Adorable.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I do hope we get that bromance. I really want to.
Yeah, because we got to see Young. We got to see who was the other author that we saw briefly?
Kafka.
Kafka. Yeah, you guys just beautifully placed these like famous people in time.
Well, I think that goes back to the format.
Yeah.
A 10-hour format allows for, almost demands, exploration not just of the man but of the
other
people
people
around
who
the man,
interacted, yeah.
and not just the intimate people like Mileva and Elsa, but the from Max Planck, obviously Philip Leonard, and the other people in the science community, the other people in the world that had influence on him, like Chaim Weizmann. There are stories. His life was so amazing. If you think about 2 world wars, the rise of Zionism, and ultimately Israel becoming
yeah.
a state, coming to America in that volatile time, it was really truly a remarkable life. And I think that was one of the things that amount of time in that format allowed for. And again, I can never tip my hat enough to Noah and Ken and the writers' room and Ron and the creative people that really cracked how to tell this story and include all of this, all of the history, all of the science, all of the religious concepts,
All of the women.
all layered behind a soap opera that was real.
Yeah.
And, it's a remarkable feat of writing. And I think that's why I have a lot of people, that was friends of mine and family who, say they're riveted by this. But they always use that word, that they're riveted, not just interested or entertained. They're riveted. And I think there's so much going on. And again, the writers and the directors pulled this off, and the actors pulled this off.
Yeah.
It feels like a thriller.
Oh, it does.
It looks like a
It
movie.
feels like a
I was on
thriller,
the edge of my
even
seat.
though it's a story of a man.
I think you guys really were, I don't know if fortunate is the right word, but the timeliness of the show is it's poignant, and it's affecting when you're watching it. Even today with the stuff with Hiram and exploring otherness, and how do you relate to your religion and your people and still be a part of a country that's larger than you, which is a thing we're seeing a lot of subsective groups dealing with currently. And it was kind of explored beautifully in Einstein first, being protected by his wife, of saying, I'm worried that if you speak out, you'll be hurt. And then we get this moment where he gets to talk to his people. And oh my gosh, guys, extras casting / dressing in that scene was so beautiful. The way that, without any words, we got to see different classes of people choosing to leave as they heard the information Einstein was delivering. The idea of the upper class being like, but we can assimilate. We have the ability. We have the funds to do it. We have the right look. We could disappear into the society and be happy. And you see behind them a lot of poor people. We have the woman remove her ring. We see the little boy chases him in to give him a nickel to be like, but maybe you could do something with this. I can help. I want to be a part of it. I was really affected by that scene. I thought it was beautiful.
That little boy gives him the quarter and says, "They took away my father, and I want you to build him a home." To build him a home. It was so heartbreaking. I kind of teared up. I just couldn't watch it.
Yeah.
But I also thought what was fascinating is how you see this progression of Einstein. So in the beginning, he says, okay, we need a home, but is Palestine the answer? I mean, it's not a question of if, but a question of when they will rise up.
What's crazy about that was insane.
It was
that forethought.
Yeah, he's just so knowledgeable. I mean, he could see the times and everything. I mean, he's great at science and math, but I feel like he looked at the world and saw trends and knew, there was multiple times where he's like, we should be worried about Hitler. And then he even mentioned the rise of, Palestine and the conflict that's going on now.
Yes.
And that's 70 plus years, 60 plus years, and is ahead of his time.
Well, I think he had the benefit, to what degree I can know this, but I think he had the benefit of being a scientist and looking at things from a place of logic, not of emotion, not of money, and not of political maneuvering,
and of observation,
and being able to see things for what they are, and in that way, and literally see things for what they are, not just think things for what they are. I think that's
great
where the thought experiment part of his life. There's a couple of great books that I'll just recommend.
Please do.
I'm
going to write them down.
One is called Einstein's Dreams. Okay. It's not a very big book, but it's an amazing book that talks about his imagination. And my business partner Jeff Cooney turned me onto that book. It was one of his favorites, and encouraged me to read it early on when we were thinking about all this stuff.
Does it mention him going into meditative states to get into his? Because I've kind of delved into a little bit of how he got into these wild premises, and it was my understanding that he kind of almost meditated and it just came to him.
Well, he fell into them.
Yeah, it was
and when he was there, early on, I think even in the first episode, he's in a classroom and he's just looking at the window and light. And
you guys did a great job.
He gets into that space.
Yeah.
And then he sees things. And then they make sense, and then he tries to explain them.
You also mentioned E equals...
Another book, a writer named David Badanis wrote a book called E equals MC squared.
Okay.
It's a biography of the equation, and he aspires to explain the equation and what it means and its application and why it's so important in a very accessible way.
Awesome.
And I found that to be a terrific thing to read. It's actually a great read, and it helped me, almost, I could put it down, feel like I knew it, and then someone would say, so explain it to me, and then I can't. Read the book.
Summer reads are now done. You know what you need.
Yes. Now you're all set.
As we're winding down a little on time, I want to skip to Hoover, because some interesting stuff with that. I love watching Hoover in history, because he's he's such an emotionally complicated man who made some who made this like long-standing important institution, but at the same time made some real dick moves. And watching that like dichotomy of like great American institution to like harming whole groups of people to hiding a lot about your personal self was great. And I wasn't sure how much we were going to get into it. I liked like that we got just because everyone knows Hoover. These little snippets
little glimpse
of him.
Yeah.
Particularly that phone call. Was that Office Bugs?
Wait,
know,
what?
but I loved that.
So
Which phone call?
when Geist gets a phone call from Hoover, he just as he starts warming up to Einstein, he gets this and I know we have a guest here who might be able to answer that. So before we address him with the question, I wanted to ask you guys what you thought. I was like, that Office is bugged. He's like, you're getting too close to Einstein. I had to make a call.
Think about
I think it was bugged.
I
I
think it
didn't
was
think
bugged.
about that.
I
at
Definitely
all.
was bugged. Because the next,
yeah.
I mean, in the previews we saw something with bugging, but yeah, that makes perfect
Well,
sense.
it also had to be bugged because if Geist were just relaying the information himself, you wouldn't have had Einstein's personality, which is why I think he got denied. If Geist were just saying the answers, Einstein's answers were relatively palatable. It's when Einstein had his personality that was a little bit confrontational.
That's what
when you
worried
get
Hoover. Yeah.
I thought you were referring to the other phone call when Hoover says, "Get me, Geist."
No, the earlier one. Bugged Office? Yes?
Well, I mean, I
Are we
can't
going to learn more later?
No, I can't tell you exactly. I mean, Mueller might find out, but no, I can't tell you for certain that Office was bugged. But I know that Hoover's world was bugged.
Okay.
And Hoover,
Wow.
you know,
Yes.
again, it's an interesting theme. You can almost see a direct line from Hoover to Nixon to Roy Cohn to Donald Trump, where the idea of using fear for a purpose is an idea that, you know, I don't think it's a good
weapon.
idea, but it's a weapon. And Hoover was the Red Scare. I mean, that was his brainchild, was the idea of scaring people into a certain kind of behavior and activity, and creating the politics of the other. As, you know, as we said for a minute, the politics of, well, who's the other? If we can create another, then we can defend ourselves. And you have to have another to defend yourself. And I
organize
think
people around.
Hoover was a in a political sense and a police sense, a mad scientist. And, you know, very interesting that a very logical man without a political agenda became such an enemy to Hoover conceptually, because his thought process was not to create division and fear. It was to create unity. And that in itself is offensive to a guy like Hoover. So in an internal society that Hoover was creating that was generally bugged, I think you could assume it was.
And Chaplin and Einstein had this in common, because Chaplin was also then kicked out of the U.S. at some point, and he became an enemy of the state when he was an actor-director. Interesting.
Yeah, and I mean, again, history repeats itself. And I, you know, not myself taking a political stance one way or the other, I personally don't think that creating an environment of fear is intelligent. No. I don't think it's smart. I think it foments anger and division, and you end up with a lot of terrible things happening as a result of that, which is why they create unity in kindergarten, and let's all kind of hold hands and all be good, and then nobody fights and everything's cool. And I think that, you know, Hoover just wasn't that kind of cat.
You know, speaking of Hoover, fast forwarding to the Manhattan Project, we didn't get a lot of it, but I think the public associates Einstein and the bomb together. But after reading it, I realized that Einstein didn't really work on the Manhattan Project because Hoover didn't give him clearance. I think you thought they probably worked together, right? On the Manhattan Project?
Hoover wouldn't have been like working with Einstein.
No, so he didn't allow Einstein to work on it.
He thought Einstein, you know, in a way, it's a very complicated part of Einstein's existence, and something that ultimately, going back to the original conversation of format, why 10 hours as opposed to a movie, why it's so hard to do, in my opinion, a 2-hour exploration of his life. Well, but you have to do the bomb.
Have to.
You ultimately have to do the bomb, because his life is that irony that in trying to solve the mysteries of the universe for humanity's sake, he creates an equation that leads to the greatest death machine in history, which was the opposite of what his goals were, and you see that in his relationship with Haber, you know, that Franz Haber. That was, you know, he looked down on Haber for creating gas, but because Einstein was a part of the Prussian Academy and was a part of that group and that scene, Hoover saw him as a weapon.
Yeah.
Here's a man who may or may not, in Hoover's kind of distorted mind, have anarchistic thoughts or is a communist, and he's a Jewish man from Eastern Europe. He's a Jew. I mean, that's, of course he's going to associate with some communists in that era, but in Hoover's mind, he's a weapon. And ultimately, in a crazy way, he was, because he created something that could be used to create the bomb.
Yeah.
And I think that you'll see in the next
the
2
preview,
episodes,
he said something along those lines.
some of this
Yeah.
explored. But I think that if we only had 2 hours, we'd probably do the next 2 hours.
Right.
Yeah.
Because that's what he's most known for.
Good to know. Next week
Yeah.
is the movie. You said something really interesting in there that I want to make sure we touch on before we leave this episode. Einstein is awarded the Nobel Prize.
Yes.
But not for relativity.
Not for
No.
relativity, and he decides not to go because he's essentially like, forget those guys. They don't support relativity. They gave me this
They gave it
little
off based off
gold
of-
pass because I have popular.
Photogenetic something.
yeah, it was
Yeah.
based
Yeah.
off of what Philip Leonard had done before.
But
and
that
he,
was the point
improved
that I
it.
want to bring up.
Yes.
Is
Yeah.
the fact that he calls out. He's like, Philip Leonard's going to be so mad, and Elsa's like giggling
Elsa was so
because
happy.
it's based off of Philip Leonard's research, but based off what we're hearing today about the Manhattan Projects, I feel like that's also those tables will be flipped on him next week, because Philip Leonard would never help Einstein. Einstein would never help to build the bomb, and yet this thread that we've seen throughout the show of scientists helping science create
Building
things
up
that we
things,
don't
yeah.
necessarily want to do. I'm excited to see the conclusion of that, to see how the creators decided to wrap that up.
Yeah.
With that in mind, let's jump into predictions.
Already.
You're gonna see some fun. There we go. Hey.
I know what happens, so I'm recusing myself.
Fair enough.
Absolutely. So, as we mentioned, Manhattan Projects.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
so we know we have 2 hours. What are we hoping to see in these last 2 hours?
Ooh, there is a very important quote that Einstein says, I think, after seeing the bomb go off, that I would love to see spoken,
Come to life.
come to life.
I want to see him in America. So,
Yeah,
we
that's
see
fair
in
enough.
this episode, he is at odds with Geist. And then they come to an understanding, and I don't want to get rid of this episode without saying, Geist then, if this is true, and I wanted to
Oh, yeah,
know if
in
this
the
is
episode, they wrote
100%
that.
true. So he says to Geist, I'm not going to sign this communist thing, I don't have to. And Geist gives him the visas anyway. And then Einstein says, you're going to lose your job. And he's like, well, I'll have to find
beautiful.
other ways to be of service. And so Einstein signs, and he says, I want you to promise me that you will not have Elsa and I be the only Jews you let into America.
That's very
Is that a
beautiful,
true
yeah.
quote? I know that-
I don't know if it's a verbatim quote, but as you noticed at the end of the episode, it's the
50,000.
only end
Yeah.
that a Chiron comes up and gives Geist the credit that he deserves. I mean, not a man anybody really knows in history, but someone who did that. And I think it's a very logical conclusion that this experience opened his eyes in a lot of ways. And but Geist in history, if you go back and study Geist, which Noah did, and also Ken and the team, and God, also tip my hat to Vincent, who's become a great friend and I love, and he's just
yeah.
so good in it.
Amazing. We love
you
him.
know,
Vincent reached out to be on this show.
oh, he's
and
so
we couldn't
right on.
make it all work.
Maybe next week. I would
But
love for that to happen.
I think that Geist is a hero. He's someone that made the right decisions in a morally either confused or corrupt environment that Hoover was creating. Geist was a hero who stood up for what he knew was right, and I think he's someone that can inspire a lot of people, today. But also, it really is a cool cat in history. He's a guy who did that, and I think Ken and the team wanted to give him credit for that, and the network as well. Let's give Geist the credit he deserves.
I'm glad they did.
50,000
I honestly
Jewish
I don't think I would be here
people.
today, actually, because I have my great grandmother who came over a week before Kristallnacht. The breaking of glass.
that gives me
And,
goosebumps.
Yeah, every time, the next week, her town was just, people were killed and everything. Like, I probably would not be here if it wasn't for that, because I'm pretty sure
I'm very close.
Which is-
My
yeah.
grandmother, as the story goes, was thrown out of a window during a pogrom at 7, made it to the next town, my father's mom, and got to America as a young Jewish woman in the exact kind of environment that they're looking at in this episode. And I feel the same. If not for certain people, I wouldn't be here.
Yeah.
And so thank goodness for them.
Yeah.
I think it's a really lovely way to commemorate Geist, especially because it's such a long time to get that payoff, and for so long it leaves you with this thought of like, what is this guy doing? He seems like such a harsh person, and to have this lovely reveal of his humanity and his desire to do good, and then also for that to be the turning point for Einstein. Like it just feels right. like you're like, yeah, this is episode 8. We're finally getting like the grandfatherly Einstein that, you know, we're more familiar with and love, and it kind of makes the whole struggle, like, I know we've all kind of lamented Maleva's struggle, and even like to his sisters and like some of the other women in the show, or the friends that he kind of brushes off here and there, and we're like, man, we expected more, but I think we see the payoff in this episode. It makes it kind of all worth it and have meaning, and I think that's incredible storytelling.
I just want to add one thing to that. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this is the first relationship we really see Einstein have with somebody who is not groundbreakingly smart. He's a bureaucrat for all other purposes.
Yeah.
So he's not a writer, he's not a politician, he's not breaking the mold in any way, shape, or form in his life currently. And they develop this nice, friendly, warm, old man bond, you know, which is kind of nice to see.
I hope we get more of those. Like, I want to see him interact more with his students, because every time we see him lecturing, it's like a burst of joy on the screen. It's so fun. I'm also kind of hoping, I'm not 100% clear on the history. Did one of his sons die before he did, or did he outlive both of his sons? Do we know?
No, I thought Edward died before.
Edward died, and I think his other son outlived him.
Okay.
Because he was at his.
So 2 things.
Check it out.
So 2 things. One, I want to see how he deals with that, because it's the worst pain a human being can go through. And I'm curious how the man handled it. And I also want to see if he and Albert ever reconnect at any level, or even if they don't reconciliate, like, what was their relationship like? I hope we get some finalization on that relationship.
Yeah. All right, people, 2 hours next week.
Awesome. Last thing I just want to throw out, you were talking about the lecture part, and this goes back to what I said, you know, when this all came together, Ron said early on that because it's Albert Einstein, because it's Nat Geo, because it's Imagine, you know, the people involved in this, there's an obligation to do things really factually and get it right.
Yeah.
You know, and that became the North Star for everybody, and to the point where when you watch his lectures and those scenes, the equations on the board are the correct equations
I kind of
of
figured
what
you
he'd
guys
be
were gonna
doing,
do,
saying during those lectures. And that talent to bring that to life, you mentioned the costume design. You know, if this is a moment where I'm here to talk about the show again, I want to tip my hat to everybody that worked on this, the crew and the keys, the department heads. They all did this job so incredibly and impeccably well, and raised the bar, I think, for telling a story like that.
Seriously,
and it comes across.
I got to come work for you.
We all want to come look for
excited
you.
about quality work.
Yes, right. Yes.
It's awesome.
Oh, wait, I have a quote from you, actually. Let me see if I can get this. When I was researching you, a very nice quote. Talking about your company and getting Genius to the network, all it took was coming out to LA and working for 15 to 16 years. But those dreams do come true, and they come true by waking up every day and doing good, high-quality work. So hats off to you. Thank you for that.
Thank you, guys. To you all as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Guys, we will be back next week for the season finale, episodes 9 and 10. We're only going to have an hour, so hopefully not too much happens. No, I'm kidding. We're going to get through it, and it's going to be a lot of fun. Until next week, Zach, tell the people where they can find you.
You can find me at Zach with a CH Silverman 2, and at my website, dzachsilverman.com.
Hey everybody, you can find me at Twitter and Instagram at DinnerPartyCHGO, and find all of my interactive TV event series, The Celebrity Dinner Party, at thedinnerparty.tv.
Hi all, you can find me on Instagram at Nobody Reads Anymore, and on Twitter at Nobody Reads, and check out my latest book review on According to a Source, which is by my dear friend Abby Stern. It's her first novel about an undercover Hollywood reporter who is trying to find her authentic self, so check it out.
And Sarah, if people want to find you on the interwebs, where can they look for you?
They can find me at Sokolow.com or in my office working on the next great show.
Excellent. Guys, I will be back next week. My name is Joelle Monique. You can find me all over the internet at Joelle Monique, every week at blackgirlnerds.com, every Wednesday at Schmoes Know. If you head over to the blackgirlnerds.com Spotify playlist right now, the queer writers have come up with a bunch of playlists describing our coming out stories. So they're a whole bunch of fun with like a wide range of music. So if you want to celebrate Pride with music, you can go check that out. Until next week, we've been AfterBuzz, and we'll see you guys next week.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
From executive producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the entire AfterBuzz TV staff, we would like to thank you for listening to the AfterBuzz TV network. To watch or listen to other after shows and post comments or questions, be sure to visit AfterBuzzTV.com. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been a presentation of AfterBuzz TV.
Buzz you later.
Buzz you later.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of AfterBuzz TV or its owners or principals.